Hello, my friends. Oh, back in Los Angeles, back in Malibu. Only for a short period. Gonna be moving out of here soon. Be nomadic for a bit. Gonna keep trying to do these lives as best we can. Got a bunch of good stuff coming up. Yeah, holy moly, we got a lot of questions about assistants today. Let me just go ahead and bring Jon on.
Hey, we need a minute here. Both of us had it coming in, and now only one of us has it coming in.
You're gonna have to carry the torch of the hair and beard, because I'm just like, it's about that time. So
looks good. I love that you just went for it. You didn't go subtle. You didn't like, oh, let's just cut a little. No, you went.
Now we're just moving forward.
Yeah.
It's surprising. A conversation no one really wants to hear us have is about hair, but but it is. I periodically just shave my head. I've had throughout my life, instead of getting an appropriate haircut, just cleansing it all. And there's something really interesting, and we talk a lot about how we spend our time. And I realize that every time I shave my head, I realize how much time I spend thinking, cleaning, manipulating, worrying, something about my hair. And now all of that time is free.
Yeah.
Like I even just like getting in the shower, I put like a little dop of shampoo and just went like this, and then I'm done. I probably didn't even need to do that.
You just have to do that.
Yeah, just make sure I'm cleaning up. And I was like, cool, my shower time just went down. Like everything is,
I mean, it's like when you learn about intermittent fasting, you don't have to eat breakfast. You know, when you realize that breakfast isn't the most important meal of the day, it's like, oh, okay.
If you figure out how to eat the food that you need in 2 meals, you realize that you've just gained an hour out of every day. So whatever you thought was a 24-hour day is essentially a 25-hour day now. Like you could.
So now you have an hour and 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. How are you, man?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm chilling. About to hit a busy mix week and a half, because I'm going to Paris on September 1st.
Nice.
For 2 weeks. So cram in a bunch of work, and I just got, I think, 15 songs as of today that have to get done before then, and maybe more to come. So
nice, man.
It's going to be a little head down for a bit.
Well, it's I'm sure you will be utilizing the services of your lovely assistant, which is your assistant is the only thing the topic for the day, but the idea of assistants. We got so many questions, and I was trying to think, whenever we do these full hours on a single topic, I'm trying to think about how best to frame it. There were a lot of questions that were very specifically about you and your assistant and prepping mixes and all that. But then, of course, there were lots of questions just generally about being an assistant, what our experience was, how people can get jobs, what to expect. And I realized when thinking about it, you and I have both been assistants at various, so this is the other thing I was going to say. I know you would immediately go, no, I didn't work under anyone. I worked with someone.
I haven't been an assistant. I haven't done the role.
Well, let's just, for the time being, talk about you working with Tony as a junior mixer, collaborating with him, however you want to define it. Let's put that all under the umbrella of the thing that people think of when they're saying, how do I get connected with a big producer as an assistant? So you were not called an assistant, but you were a young mix engineer who did not have a lot of credits and were taken under the wing of a big mixer. I think just for the sake of this conversation, let's put all those things together, because I think a lot of the questions are really about how do I make connections with people. I think we should start off talking about the process of finding assistants / finding a team, finding people to mentor or to finding a mentor. We've talked about this stuff a little bit before, but there were a lot of questions in that realm. So let's start there. And then if we get through that, then we can get into, okay, what is it actually day to day to be an assistant? Or what is it like when Josh preps things for you and that sort of thing? We can get to that second. So I think the first thing we should do is get through or just basically start talking about what the process of becoming an assistant or finding assistants. So I don't know if you immediately want to launch into anything, but there's a whole bunch of questions and I want to kind of focus them You got any?
Yeah, I've found my assistants by asking people that I trust if they know anybody that's a great engineer. And I realized that I prefer people that are very green. They haven't had much. Like one of my second out of 3 assistants I've had didn't even know Pro Tools before he met me.
Yeah.
Used Ableton quite well as a producer, but not necessarily as an engineer, and never touched Pro Tools, and that was amazing. So Ingmar uses Pro Tools like I do, so it's just really an efficient collaboration. And now we're doing a fair share of Atmos mixes together, and I get him some mix work and send things his way that don't. That maybe they can't afford me, or it's not something that I think that I'm well suited for, and we can communicate on them when we're working together because of that language that we spoke, that we developed together.
So let's talk about that real quick. As maybe in the macro, how do people get hired as assistants? It seems like what you're saying, and I'll sort of expand out of this. There's the other thing with a lot of this is what we're actually talking about is the hiring process and building teams. And that's something that I think Jon and I can speak to in our realms, but it actually varies quite a bit based on the temperament of whoever's running the organization, whether that's a producer or an engineer or a songwriter or a record label or any of these sorts of things. And not just the organization, but people will have different needs and desires. I think for me, I'm very similar, I assume similar to you, in the sense that when I've hired people or wanted to collaborate with people, if the idea is we're going to work on something long term, if you hire someone for a project or work on a project, I'm looking for a skill or a task to get done, and I'm going to try to hire the person who is most likely to be able to execute that. But if you're talking about long-term relationships, which is what an assistant is, or the mentor-assistant relationship, I think what you're really looking for is work ethic and personality, because if someone has the drive and the excitement and they're pleasant to be around and they're going to be reliable and work hard, you can kind of teach them anything. They can learn anything. So the idea of like having a Pro Tools certification may be important for it might be important for some things. If you're going to get an assistant job at a studio, they need you to know how to use Pro Tools before you get there. But usually if you're working for a person, if you show the ability to, I imagine that having Pro Tools proficiency is by and large going to be a good thing, but there are many exceptions to it, and it's not going to be as important as being able to show up on time, excited, and be able to adapt to the person that you might be working for.
Yeah, we're talking. There's 2 ways into this conversation, at least, and one of them being the studio assistant and the person that shadows and doesn't really get to touch the gear, or someone that patches cables, or that's kind of old world assistant engineer, and they still exist, obviously, because studios are still running, so that's the way. And then the other way is to find a producer and become maybe an intern or some way of shadowing their engineer. Their engineer is now looking to also start to produce. This happens very often. So that engineer is now trying to find someone else to show the workflow of that producer. That's how one of my best friends became such a successful producer. He started doing the same thing for Jeff Basker. And, he was wrapping cables. He was even getting some dry cleaning, at one point, and then worked his way up to, now I'm engineering. And now I'm actually co-writing and producing with, and now I'm doing it on my own, right? So I want to talk about that way, because the studio way, to me, I've been so far removed. I've actually not even really had an assistant job at a studio. I was an intern when I was 16 and 17 at Cove City Sound Studios in Long Island. That really taught me a lot. I had a lot of good experience shadowing engineers, not talking, not asking too many questions. Just, okay, this guy mixes with the faders really low, but driving the console, or this guy has his faders really high and his inputs really low and cleaner sounding, and he mics a drum kit like this. This guy does 14 mics. This person does, 3 mics, watching but not saying very much. That is an assistant role. That's an intern assistant role. Like, they would make me clean up cables. You did that for Eric. But I think what, we're trying to build, I'm trying to talk more openly about mentorship, which is
it's also the future. I mean,
that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Even when I was working for Eric, I was assisting him starting out, but it was him, and his studio was not a commercial studio. So even though I was wrapping cables, it was hanging out with him all the time. And so
Josh comes over to my home. He's here now. getting stems done, and this is my house. So there's a level of trust and respect that has to be mutual there too. And I think that's becoming more and more common with backhouse studios, or studios in the living room, wherever it is. You're now at a deeper level of trust with the person you're both collaborating with, but also like professionally, a boss too, right? Like I'm theoretically his boss, but to me, he's more like a brother. And that's a potentially a tricky balance. But that's what it's becoming a lot of the time. It's not easy to separate these in our world, and I think that's more important to discuss. I think it's
let's talk about the entry points into that. So you said it earlier when you were looking for an assistant, and I think I'd like to give a little bit of a monologue about how you meet people in the music industry. There's this idea, and I think we've talked about it before, but there's this idea that you're going to get an opportunity and then you're going to meet the people that are several levels above you, and then they're going to pull you up into their level. And the truth is, you want to be making the best work with the people around you, and then you all come up together. One of the questions we got in a few different ways was about relationships. They said, did you, when you were assisting, did you meet a bunch of people? Did you meet A&Rs and managers that ultimately became clients? And the answer is sort of yes, but it's not what you think. What it is what you do is you meet the people as you're starting out that are also starting out. And then in 6 years, when so-and-so has a manager job, or then they have an A&R, or now they're managing a bunch of artists, and they remember when you were an assistant and they were an assistant day-to-day manager, now you both have come up. It's really about building with the people you're around. So there is a lot of value in that. You have some legitimacy when you're an assistant because you're working on records, but really what you're doing is you're making connections with the people that are at your level and around you. Because all the people that are older, you meet the big people, you might meet a big A&R and that sort of thing, but they already have their go-to people. It's unlikely you're going to slip into there. So I think the value that there is value there for that. But I should tell
a story there that is very relevant.
Go.
And very realistic, that I'm sure other people either have experienced or will experience by default. Being attached to Tony it was 5 years. I was across the hall from him for 5 years in a small room. I would work in his room with him on songs, or I'd be on my own stuff across the hall, or I'd be doing writing sessions as well. And after 5 years, I just from one of my own relationships, which was a writer named Budo that came in from Seattle. Long story short, he also, he was working on Macklemore stuff, got me a chance to mix the sophomore album for Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. And I did that all by myself. It was my first project without Tony attached. It was a big project. It had a hit. It had Downtown on it. And I, not cockily, like I'm still not very confident in myself, but I moved out because I felt like, okay, cool. Well, I have this hit. I have this record. It's probably time I get my own space. I was tired of the small room. If Macklemore wanted to come to the studio, like I wouldn't bring him here. It sounds like shit in here. I'm doing my best in a room, but I get to have access to Tony's and I would check things, whatever. So I'm going to leave. I find this studio downtown where I'm at now, 6 years later, thinking I'm all hot shit and I'm going to do good work after having a successful record with a huge artist. And I got no work for 3 to 6 months on my own. Any relationship I had with Tony, with Tony's A&Rs that I met, they were Tony's A&Rs. I wasn't trying to poach gigs from Tony. That's not how we do it. We all want to come up together. I'm not trying to take work from anybody. So I don't work even today with one A&R that I met during the time with him. That just don't. It's just not. They're not my people. If at some point I'm on a record and I wind up working with one of them, I think on a Selena Gomez thing that happened on one song. He mixed most of the album and I worked with this woman. But like that came from a producer relationship. It didn't come from me reaching out to the A&R. Those relationships are off limits. That's the whole point. But I didn't get work for 3 to 6 months after that. I had to take a big step back to go maybe 2 steps forward, or whatever the saying is, 2 steps back to go 1 step forward. And I don't know if I thought anything differently about like what you just said. Was I supposed to maintain these relationships? Like I see it happen the other way, and I see people kind of trying to skim stuff all the time. But even for me, like Josh got asked yesterday or last week to mix a song for an artist that I've mixed for. And before he responds to the A&R, he calls me. He's like, yo, so-and-so reached out to me. Like, kind of feels a little bit weird. What should I do? And I was like, oh, hit Nathaniel. Like, if they can't afford me doing it and they want to keep it on the team, like, go for it. But thanks for calling me.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the same thing with Tony. That happened once. Someone did reach out. I forgot who it was. I don't have a recollection of this. But I was like, yo, it's kind of weird. Like, dude called me. And he's like, yeah, that's kind of odd. Like, let me talk to him. Oh, well, maybe we'll split this one. You know, let's.
Right. And
then there's a conversation to be had. So there is that thing that we have to be honest about, that at some point someone's not going to be able to afford the higher up. And that's going to happen. And that's cool, too. But if there's a line of communication in a developed relationship as a team, then there's a hierarchy of that conversation that needs to take place. And I'm still figuring that out now with Josh and Ingmar.
Well, let's break down the entry point for some of these things. So people, maybe actually we can sort of like we do with things like compression. People think, oh, compression, let's use a compressor, but it turns out dynamic range compression can be done with all these different components, and there's new tools. I think the idea of assisting as the way you learn about making records as the main way, let's break down what's actually valuable about it. I think you and I have talked about mentorship a lot. We can talk about maybe specifically what that means, but let's talk about maybe some of the things that are not as important about becoming an assistant. I think that the idea of mentorship is probably underrated overall. It's really important to, and it's part of what
it's almost non-existent.
Well, part of what we're trying to provide here is at least some insight between a couple of record makers talking through ideas, so people can get some of the feeling of what it's like to be around record makers that are doing it all the time. But the idea of being in a room and being around people to learn, just the physical presence is really important. But let's go to the other side, which is learning about how to make records, because a lot of people asking questions about resumes and things like that. I think people are misunderstanding. There's so much more that you can and should be doing on your own that is going to dictate whether you find an assistant position, whether you become a successful mix engineer or producer or whatever. There were a lot of questions about what do you look for in a resume? What do you look for? What people, and the truth is, like, that's not really important in what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, you know, you said it when you were looking for an engineer, you said, an assistant, you asked people around you and said, who's great?
Yeah.
So what it turns out, I think, and please give me your thoughts on this, that at almost every stage of your career, I think even where you're at in your career, where I'm at in my career, we're almost always overqualified for the job that we're doing. When I was an assistant, I was producing bands on the side, I was mixing stuff, but I was, you know, getting paid $7 an hour to wrap cables, and I would spend another 5 hours after the session producing my own stuff that ultimately got signed to major labels and all this kind of stuff. But you want to be doing great work with great people who all talk about each other. Again, it gets back to make records with the people around you, make great things, have a network of people, because that's how you will meet the great bands. That's how you will win. You'll have more people in your network that are doing things. And so if somebody's record hits, then you're a part of that scene. Or when when people are looking for assistance and they ask around, if you're doing great work and you're a young person making records, your name is going to come up. And that's really the number one, far and away the number one thing to do, is make records that are great with the people around you. And that will get you the money, the success, the manager, the connection to having an assistant job, meeting A&Rs and managers. If you make great work, people will talk about you and your work.
And I would add to that the opportunity that will actually stick and last longer, a lifetime, whatever, those relationships will come when you least expect them.
Yeah.
Let's just jump back to resumes. I'm never going to read a resume. A resume to me is an MP3 with words that say, I'm trying to be a mix engineer.
I mix this.
How does this sound? I mix this. How does this sound? That's a resume.
But even let's be precise about it. You're not listening to a lot of people's MP3s unless if you're actively looking for someone. You go, I need someone who's great. You ask around.
I'm gonna ask around, and
so
that's what I did.
So let's go through the actual process of that. So you're like, okay, Ingmar or whoever was before Josh is doing more stuff on their own. You need a new person. Who do you call? How do you put it out there? What does that look like?
This is really easy to talk real life. So I had just mixed most of the whole thing, the whole Free Black album for Black. And his engineer was so on point, man. Like the way that the things came in sounding, the stems, the headroom, the quality of the recording, the attention to detail on the files.
So the preparation and professionalism of the person getting you files was above and beyond. Above and beyond
anything I've experienced. And I've mixed, at this time, I had mixed for huge artists with Tony and a couple by myself. And just like, it was a clusterfuck. And this was just easy, man. I think we mixed the whole album in less than 2 weeks with notes. Like they came through and we sat on the couch and did notes. And then when I needed someone, I'd ask that engineer. I was like, JT, who do you know? And he's like, oh, like my best friend from Berkeley said, is at Interscope as an assistant, but he wants to be a mixer, so this would be a great opportunity for him. At first I was like, Berkeley, and then I was like, all right, let's just get lunch. If the boy can eat with me, then we'll be good. It's all I cared about.
Bonding over food,
but also just like, what's the vibe? Like, can we talk? Like, what are we getting into? And then I knew right away. I knew, by the way, I think there was like this shrimp papaya salad at Little Sister in downtown that he was just like, what the fuck are we eating? I was like, all right, you got the job. It was really simple. He can correct me, but I think that was the vibe.
Let's do the linear path on this. You're looking for an assistant, and what you do is you contact someone who you don't really know very well, who you just worked with on this one project, who does excellent work, and you said,
excellent work.
You do excellent work. I'm looking for a person to be an assistant because of the quality of your work. Do you have any friends? Do you know anybody that's great? And they go,
I think I said, because it can't be you, who else would you recommend?
So look, I mean, this is the perfect example. It's like, my roommate from music school is also great, and I'm doing stuff for, like, that's how you make these connections. Like, the idea that you're going to get a submission page and find somebody that way is just an absurd thing. That's so much of the music industry is based on these interpersonal relationships. And people asked in the chat there, and asked also on the questions beforehand, well, what if I'm not in the big city? What if I'm in a faraway place? And the answer is, it's harder, of course, because you can't just go show up and meet people in places. But I believe even this story was the person that you found this way. Was this Josh, or was this somebody else?
Yeah, Josh. Yeah.
Was Josh in LA at the time?
Yeah, he was. He was working at Interscope at the time.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously that helps.
But Ingmar wasn't when I met Ingmar. He was in Portland. He moved down to take the job.
I was going to say, too, if people haven't gone and listened to the hour I did with Kian, I can't remember which episode, maybe somebody in the chat can say, Kian and I both worked under Eric Valentine for years. He worked there after me. But when I met Kian, I think I was in LA, he was in Santa Cruz, but we sort of bonded in New York. And so he wasn't actually in LA and wasn't actually ready to do that sort of thing. But it's like,
it can happen anywhere.
It can happen anywhere, and increasingly so. I think there are relationships that form on the internet, but in the end, it's really about the quality of the work. If somebody's doing great work, and you didn't get it, episode 47 with Kian. That's one worth listening to. We talk a lot about this journey and how he and I both got into becoming assistants for Eric. But like we said, so much of it, you interfaced with this engineer, not in person. You interfaced with them because the guy sent you files that were like, this guy really knows what he's doing. Everything is really well organized. I'm going to contact this person because they do good work. If I need something in the future, I need to find good people. I know this person does good work. They probably know good people. That's how so much of this stuff happens. That's how I've hired people in the past. That's how I think that's basically how I got my assistant job back in the day. Is I recorded local bands that people liked. There was this band called The Matches that ended up signing with Epitaph, and got to meet a bunch of people that way. But Eric Valentine got it passed to him from some other Bay Area, from actually Blag from the Dwarves. It was like a West Coast punk rock band, SF punk rock band, that the record just got passed around, and my name was on the back. So it was because the work was good. It got passed around back when CDs were the thing. Okay, I've sort of lost the train. Are there?
What up, Sam?
What else? Let me see. Let me look for other questions. Okay, yeah.
Can we just talk about how imperative having one is? Like to have the output as I'm going to talk from a mixer's point of view and a producer point of view.
Let's do a little bit of the mixer. Yeah.
Let's talk about the value of one, right? Mm-hmm. Of having an assistant from the position of the professional that would not be able to do what they do without one. So for people that want to figure out how to become one, they need to know the value that they.
What does an assistant actually do in your world, and why is it important? And how? What are the skills?
I know you wanted to wait to get there. I'm not even saying what the day to day is, but how important it is for the success and consistency of a mix engineer business or a production business, right? Because the assistant might send the stems for a producer to an engineer. They might be doing the stemming of to get to the engineer. So. It could be the engineer themselves or the assistant too. So the importance of communication skills, like the ability to speak for yourself and speak on behalf of me or the other person is a very key factor. Mm. Like sometimes I need Josh to send an email for me, but it needs to sound like it's coming from me. It can still be from his address, but it needs to be from me. This is how I represent. I need my managers to do the same thing. Yeah. I don't want quick responses that mean nothing. I want to describe what we did to this record, why we did it, how great it was before we touched it, what my intention was, what intention I read into from you. Right? There's that kind of responsibility of making people feel like they're not feel like they're cared for. Like actually, that is what it is. Actually caring for. And you can miss that in email. You can miss that in how you text. You can miss that in how you communicate on the phone when something isn't really clear via email on how we like our stems sent or how I don't like sessions. Or when I get a session, Josh is going to make stems from it for me to have. You can send a session, but it's going to be stemmed down. And then if we need something dry or with less processing, I'll have access to it. That's nice. But that's not where I want to start from. And communicating that politely and professionally and why we do it and how it makes the process easier and quicker and keeping the vibe that you've ingrained in your record that's embedded in that we want to maintain but also improve. And like recently we got a funny email back, or Josh did it, he shared it with me, from someone that would not give us their mix bus. And you said it was a proprietary mix bus. And I was like, that's funny. Like, I feel you, man. Like, I feel you, but that's like going to make me laugh. And it could have been, I think that email could have been worded well. And, Josh politely was like, that's fine. Instead of having to push on him. Like we know when to pick and choose battles. So to me, that's the most important thing. Like, be cool, communicate well, be polite, but don't take shit from people at the same time. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, and just understand that balance, because it's easy to be walked on as an assistant, right? So Josh and I, and with my management team, I don't refer to him as my assistant. Mm-hmm. He's not taking out my garbage. I think he's done that twice in the 3 years he's been with me because I just needed that to happen. Yeah. He's rarely picking up shit from me unless it's tubes for a piece of gear that needs to be repaired, or handling a sale of a piece of, something that's studio regarded. I'm not asking him to pick up my dry cleaning. And I expect him to do the things that I ask him deliberately at the, most professional level possible. That's it. Like, stay on task and do it great. I think the biggest part of being an assistant, it sounds like in your world, and I think this is most worlds, is that you're coming in to be a part of a team and basically go into the flow and attitude and communication style of someone else. And it's actually that part of what that really teaches you, which again, I like to break down the idea because not everybody's going to get the chance to be an assistant, but trying to communicate what's valuable about it. You learn a sort of professional humility, both in the sense of if you're working for someone who's a decent professional, odds are that they're
at least somewhat pleasant to be around and can teach you some professionalism, because if someone is a professional, I guess by definition, they know something about professionalism, but also it puts you in the place of learning within a hierarchy, which is humbling in a really important way, that you learn how to, you learn how to be opinionated and have good taste and that sort of thing, but learn when it's appropriate to impose that upon the person that you're working for or under, and then also in the macro, the project that you're working on.
I didn't finish my train of thought on there. I jumped off and I got confused. What I meant to say is that I don't refer to him as an assistant. I refer to him as my engineer, because he is in his own right an engineer. He is engineering for the mix, right? So the credit is engineer for mix or engineered. That's what it is, because he's not assisting me. Theoretically, that's what he's doing, but he's also in his own right has his own leadership roles that he needs to take on, right? It's like the Toyota factory, thing from back in the day, right? Like everybody has their job and they can do it as creatively and efficiently as they can do it to make the assembly line work accordingly. If I minimize to this is the only thing you do and you can't grow out of this, then what's the incentive to stay and work and grow in that? He's his own engineer, and he engineers the session for me before I get to jump on it and be creative. Sure. And he can do that however he wants to do it. He can do it if it takes 20 minutes, if it takes 6 hours. That's for him to figure out how to do and maximize. File organization, when we do backups, how we do backups, how we manage recalls on the master bus that I have. That's for him to figure out. It's not for me to tell him how to do it. And that's him being his own engineer. And that's really important. I don't really understand the assistant when it comes to you're working with one person. I think that's very, very true in a studio scenario, or if there's a producer, then the recording engineer, and then the assistant engineer that's either in the studio or in the household with the producer. That's different. They're not actually maybe touching or facilitating anything to do with the exact session. They could be doing the cables or maybe patching some stuff. That's different than hands-on. But I learned the hard way from not getting credited properly for what I've done, and I don't want to do that to my team, my people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you want to go through specifically what Josh will do on a mix? So he gets
file intake.
He gets files in some form. You have some prompt that says, hey, you're delivering files for Jon Castelli to mix. If your Pro Tools is like this, print this. And
I have a one sheet.
You have a one sheet.
The one sheet.
By the way, are you willing to share that? I will put it on the Discord, because a lot of people are curious about that. I don't have to put you on the spot right now, but I'm curious. People are curious what it actually, because especially young mixers are like, what do I tell people to send me and all that. We talk about it offline, but I'd be curious what yours is, since I've actually never sent
why not. Yeah, I don't see why not. How about when you send me a mix, I send you the thing and then you post it.
Perfect. And I'm actually having a call about a song today that I want to do with you.
Could assistants start a mixing session? Let's answer this question. Yes, they could.
Let's go up to there. Let's go up to there, because that's what it is. So he's getting the files. They're being sent to him, presumably copied to you. He gets files, and whether it's WAV files bounced from Logic or Ableton, or a Pro Tools session with a bunch of things bounced, it comes in some form that is
folder,
not exact,
session,
and it is not. You have a specific format for how you like to see a mix. You sit down and things are ready for you to mix. And so he basically converts the files from however they're delivered in all these different ways to the format that you like.
To my world, yes.
And that includes what? That includes the sort of main plugin options to start messing around, like we've talked about.
Very few, very small template. But mostly what it comes down to is making sure that the arrangement is exactly the arrangement of the most recent rough mix that everybody's been listening to. That's the most important role in the prep. Is this sounding exactly like or nearly exactly like? Sometimes with mix bus processing, it's not going to be exactly, but a lot of the times through my mix bus, it just sounds a little bit better already before I even start. So that's not something I'm super worried about. With Tony, it was different. It was like, I'm not touching this until it's exactly the same, because he was the opposite. He liked a session. with stuff on it. He's not turned off by like 8 plugins on people's things. He's down to tweak a little bit. I'm too tweaky. So if I see 8 to 10 plugins on a track and the compression is on there, I'm going to take it off, or I'm going to change the attack time for no fucking reason just because I think it looks wrong or sounds wrong. I'm too geeky for that. So I don't want to start tweaking. So I want to see a clean session, exactly how it sounded prior to me getting it. And then, like I said, if something is way over processed and I know I can improve it, then I'll either ask for a raw version of it, or we might already have it in the deliverable sent by whoever the producer or engineer is. So he's making it sound exactly like the rough mix, or as close to as possible. So when sometimes an ad lib is missing, sometimes a tambourine is starting on the wrong bar, and it's like, that's clearly not the same in the rough. And instead of guessing where it is in the groove, can you send back that stem? It sounds like there was an error on the bounce to that.
So he's doing all of that.
All of it.
All of it, yeah. And
I don't want to figure this stuff out. I want to jump into a record when I have the time to do it, because there's no way of me mixing 15 songs in 9 days if I have to worry about every stem being imported.
So this is the way that, and for those that aren't fully aware, this is the way that the top 30 mixers in the world mix records, which is they have an assistant or an engineer, or a team of people that are filtering everything and getting it in the format that they like to mix in. The Pro Tools session, everything's ready, and it sounds as close to the rough mix as possible, and then the mixers go. And that's when people ask, how can somebody mix a song in 2 hours? Or like, that's how you do it, is you get someone to set up a Pro Tools session, or I assume other people might use other programs. Almost everybody uses Pro Tools. I think there's a couple Logic people, but it's, you get it to the place that's how records are mixed today, which is essentially a pre-mix and a session that sounds very close, and then you take it the rest of the way. Yes. So when you start out with the Discord link is in my bio, or maybe it's not, maybe it's in the Live with Matt Rad. Somebody can provide the Discord link from the Live with Matt Rad in the chat there, please. When you start out with a new assistant, presumably there's some amount of, hey, this is how I do it. Hey, you didn't quite get this right. And, I assume that's a month or two of like, hey, you need to double check this. Here's how you word these emails. But then at a certain point, the hope is you're just not dealing with any of that. Mm-hmm. Is that?
I would say that. I've never really thought about it that way, but yeah, that's, I guess, pretty simple version of that. I mean, at this point, it's the opposite. It's like, oh, I see you're doing this a lot. I'm putting it on this bus. Or, hey, I saw you change that. Do you have a new preset for this? Because I keep seeing you change it when I'm doing stems. I'm like, oh, yeah, I changed that. Attack amount on the transient shaper on this thing.
So sorry to slow that down real quick. So what you're saying is Josh, your engineer, is now seeing you make consistent decisions on things and then setting up the mix such that you have those go-tos ready. And so at what point?
Yeah, it's like AI. It's like AI learning, it's just machine learning with human.
It's just I.
It's just I.
So I guess the question then is that a few people asked about this, the transition from assistant or engineer to main mix engineer, whatever. Do you start co-mixing at a certain point? What is the point at which how much he's setting up the mix is a co-mix? Or is that like, again, what we talk about a lot is you're going to do more than what the job is if you're going to be successful in this business. So presumably he's doing enough stuff at some point where you go, and the stuff sounds great, and he's getting mix work. You just go, great, start doing mix work, or we co-mix things together, or you go into Atmos world and we do those together. Can you talk a little bit about that transition with your assistants, and then we can talk about our own experiences? Yeah,
that's really good. I have a pretty hard line where I'm never going to put out a mix that has my name on it that I didn't do it. And it's either in its entirety or 95+%.
Which without naming names is not what everybody does.
Not what everybody does. And when I get to that point, I'm saying it now live so I can be held accountable.
Good.
When I get to that point, I'm going to start saying no. You know what I mean? More. I don't want to do that. I don't have the desire to have. It's not my ambition to have a team of 5 engineers that mix under my name at all. Like, I've never wanted that. I don't want that now. And I hopefully won't want that in the future. What I do want is a group of young engineers that I can filter work through to the best of their like genre appropriate fortes, right? So if I'm the mix, if the gift shop is the mix business, and there's a lot of indie rock stuff coming through somehow because I did a song, well, maybe Ingmar is better suited for that, so Ingmar will start it. Take it a long way. Maybe I'll jump on it for an hour or two after he spends 6-8 hours on it, and I will put my my stamp of approval on it, either by touching or giving notes or jumping on a live stream with him. I do this with a couple artists now that are just like, either they got dropped from their label and don't have the budget, but I've been working with them for so long, but they also know Ingmar from the time spent in the studio.
Right.
But it's mixed by Ingmar. Sometimes it's mixed by Ingmar and me, but a lot of the times it's just mixed by him. And because this is my intake, my business intake, I'm going to put my ears on it because of the relationship.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times it's given to him and it becomes his gig now. And it's very clear that it is his gig. There's no, oh wait, is John doing this? Even down to mix notes with Josh. I do 99% of the mix notes just because I don't think what the mix note is what the person actually wants a lot of the time. Of course,
we talked about this before,
right?
Yeah.
So I do almost everything, but I'm learning how to delegate with him. Like, okay, if it's a easy note, or like, hey, we need to do this, or I think you'll understand what that means, I'm going to do it, because I do need to learn how to delegate when it comes to that, because sometimes I'll touch 12 songs in a day because of a note to note, and then the perspective is changing too much and it's not a positive perspective shift. So I do like to take breaks and say, hey, can you do these notes? I'll check them before we send, or this one's good, just do this, send it back. And I know, and he knows when not to do that. But I'm not to the point where I'm going to have people start mixes and I finish and it's my name. I'm not going to do that.
Well, it's important to put that out there, and also important for people to know that what John just talked about varies wildly amongst the
this is my perspective.
Industry. Yeah, there are people who fully have their assistants ghost mix or ghost produce or whatever and put their names on. There's people that are amazing in trying to build the next great set of engineers and producers, like I think John is trying to do. What John just said about his experience is not necessarily how it's going to be for every mixer, and we both know that from experience.
But I would add
to
that by saying, and this might sound controversial of some sort, I don't agree with that. I don't agree that it's okay to tell someone that they're mixing it and they're not,
and somebody else is doing it. Yeah,
and someone else is doing the work. I don't understand fully understand. I understand the concept of it, but why a branded mixer is a go-to when we know that the younger, newer artists on the labels, when you hire that mixer, they're without a doubt not doing it. Yeah. I don't ever want to be in that position where people wonder if I'm doing it or not. So that's a business model choice.
Yeah. And
I think one is truly transparent and one is not truly and fully transparent. And that's a problem in business in general. And we're in a creative business. We're not really in a corporate sphere of like, propaganda of some sort. I want what's real to come through the speakers that, is done by the person hired.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think we're on the same page about that sort of morally. It's just important for people to know that it does vary. I mean, we are promoters of trying to have as much transparency. Obviously, we're doing this shit and trying to talk about it. But it's not necessarily the case for everyone everywhere. Let me see if I can hone in on a couple more questions. We can go on a bunch of tangents. There is a clip on the Live with Matt Rad where you and I are talking about meeting our mentors, so I won't go into that. I'll hit a couple people in DMs, but it's on, actually, another plug. Go to the YouTube and go to the Live with Matt Rad clips and just search for mentor, and that clip should be up there. But we've talked about things like, so I keep touching my head with my head. I'm just doing this the whole time like a fucking weirdo. Let's see. Okay, people who haven't had the chance to be assistants, what are the things that they can learn? Somebody asked the question, it was worded a little funny. What's the thing that you wish a person who hasn't been an assistant would have learned? So meaning like, what are the things that are important for those people that don't get a chance to be an assistant? I guess we talked about this a minute ago, but like,
This is good.
How do you learn the things that an assistant learns without being an assistant? And what are they? I mean, it seems like a range, and we talked about it a little bit, but
I mean, there's wisdom. There's the fact that there's another way to handle the circumstance that is presenting itself, right? I used to hear Tony like get yelled at for things, and him just be cool as ice, man. Just be like, I got you, And I used to get so frustrated at people just like being so unreasonable, and like now I'm just like, I got you. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Like, and I love that. So like New York, it's like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's cool. It's cool.
You watch people when you work for someone who knows what they're doing. They've been in the game for a long time. You pick up on a wisdom that you couldn't otherwise. It's very difficult to get otherwise.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to learn that without. I mean, again, we're trying to do our small part here by showing that things are going to be stressful 15 years into your career too, but you learn how to build good habits and you learn how to stay healthy and let things slide off. But the reality is, I think the biggest thing is exactly what you're saying, is you get to watch multiple ways that people do this thing, making music, interacting with the business, dealing with their personal lives with respect to it, but getting to watch someone who's been doing it. Eric Valentine, when I worked for him, whenever he would do something, when I'd be like, he would just go Baker's dozen, which is how many more years he'd been in it than I had. So he just as kind of a joke, he'd be like, Baker's dozen. Like, how did you know the distorted, how does it sound? You just go Baker's dozen. And that's a real thing, to be around people who've just done it for longer than you, absorbing, because people think so much about the skill set and how do I learn this trick for this thing. And most of that stuff you just pick up by doing, but being around someone who's been through it for much longer than you, you learn more quickly how to deal with the world.
Well, Spider and I have a way of saying it, which is we learned at lunch, or we learned on the stoop with Tony. We didn't learn in the room with Tony. It would be after the things were done, where either I'm witnessing him, talk to someone else and just being a fly on the wall while they're talking, whether it's with the producer or the artist outside, and he's like, "Oh, come out with us," and how is he communicating? Why did he make that move? Maybe he's willing to tell me when we're on a break, like, "Hey, I saw you do that thing," like you're talking about, like the distortions. Like, well, why did you do that? What were you going for with that? Because I don't know how to talk about what I did a lot of the times. If like, Josh is like, "Damn, that was what just happened right there? Did you just change something there?" It's like, "Oh, I don't even know why I did it." Right. But you might think back to it when prompted to have to do that. It's like, I was on the phone with a friend yesterday. He's teaching classes. It's like, imagine the first time your child is in like 5th grade and you have to do the math homework with them, and it's just to that part where you're like, "Oh, that's actually not," or maybe it's middle school. It's like, I actually don't remember that. You actually have to study again to teach your child in a way that actually makes sense to them, right? And I learned something on a podcast once, I forget what it is, but to truly understand some sort of concept, you need to be able to explain it 3 different ways. So the person that listened to one podcast or read one article and thinks they know everything about the subject matter at hand, tell us that in 3 different ways, and then I'll believe that you really understand it, and then your word is better than mine on that topic because you're clearly well read in this subject matter.
It's if you know something truly, you can teach it. Like that's the there's a lot of good standards for that. I think that's a really important part of the relationship.
So that's what you get from a mentorship, because they've had the baker's dozen experience. They've been there so many times that it's second nature to do one of the things in their toolkit, right? Whether it's intellectually or sonically, process in their process. It's like they've figured out. I have figured out so many ways to achieve a specific result that when prompted to do said thing, which is why I take notes very seriously, raising the vocal might not be the thing, but putting more mid-range on the vocal in a chorus is maybe the way to it. How am I going to do that? Well, maybe I'm going to do it with a Spectre, or maybe I'm going to do it with an EQ, or maybe I'm realizing there's too many low mids in the vocal in the chorus because I kept it on the same track as the verse, and maybe I was lazy or something happened where there's another way to do it, and that's because I've been there and understood that, and I can now tell why I did that if someone were to ask me on the stoop how I did that.
Well, so if for people that will not get to be around a Tony Maserati or a Jon Castelli or an Eric Valentine or whatever, I would say that the thing to do is, we sort of get back to the same things over and over. Find your people, and by your people I mean make music with the people around you and collaborate with people, because even though you're not likely to be collaborating with a friend who's done it for 15 years longer than you, the value of collaborating with other people and figuring it out yourself is actually where most of the learning happens. But it's also, there really isn't a substitution for being around older people, really. But you get there by just doing great work. I mean, the truth is, by the time I met Eric Valentine, I'd produced, and again, this is like pre-computers, just barely on ADATs. I'd produced like 4 albums and was playing in 2 bands and had done all these other things where I'd figured out myself. And then I got to go be in a room with a professional person where I saw all the things I'd read about on the internet, like, oh, these are Neve 1064s, and how are they different from 1083s? And I was just a kid asking a million questions. But I'd already had the base of knowledge of just making a ton of records with my friends, making hip hop, recording jazz, playing drums in bands, recording rock bands, writing songs. And doing all of those things is what prepared me to actually absorb a lot from working with real record makers. So I think you both you both will make the connections that you're trying to make by making great records with your friends. You will build long-term relationships that you're hoping to get by meeting the right person. Those are really just going to end up being your friends as you all get older. In order to really take advantage of, if you do get an assistant job or you get to collaborate with a big producer or a big mixer or something, you're much more likely to get a lot out of that if you're already making tons of records with your friends. It all kind of comes back to that. There's really that's what there's really no substitution for, because, again, you're looking for an assistant, and yes, it's nice to be able to teach them about Pro Tools and the way that you want to use it. But the reality is, we're all looking for people who other people say, this young guy is great. That's kind of what we're always looking for. Let's
be honest. I was cool with Ingmar not knowing Pro Tools, and I liked it after the fact, but I thought he made great sounding records that he was making in Ableton. Yes. So I was listening to his ear, for his ear. Yeah. And then I was like, oh, you don't know Pro Tools? That's cool. This is how we use Pro Tools.
Yeah, you're already making amazing stuff. Well, it's going to be easy to, in another program, it's going to be easy to teach you Pro Tools and get you into my world if you got the work ethic and all of that.
Yeah, I would say about the making music with your friends thing, one thing I don't know if we've touched on would be make music with your friends that allow you to show yourself in these records too.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the reason is make the records that make you love music.
Yeah, because and something about it has to be able to point to what you did. For me or someone like me to say, oh, this sounds good, I'm gonna ask, what did you do? Like, did you mix this? Yeah. Did you mix this after? Well, show me the rough mix then. So like if someone says I mixed the song, I want to hear the rough mix first with it. I want to know, what did you do? Did you improve it?
Have you actually done that? Like,
yes.
I'd want to know that too, but like, did you hire your assistant based on that stuff?
No, but I would.
You would.
I definitely would. I mean, well, yes, based on some of the factors of, did you make this sound as good? What did you do? Yeah, that's how I got Ingmar. Like, I was like, oh, you did this. You're credited as the producer. What did you do? And he's like, show me the session. I'm like, okay, you did this. And it was all him on. I think it
all comes back to just make great things with people.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can grab any other questions. I packed a lot of questions together, so I'll hit some people back on DM, and we can talk about it more in the Discord after. Let's do really quick the transitioning out of assisting. Both Kuj and Colin and one or two other people asked about this. Transitioning out of assisting into doing your own thing. I said it a little bit earlier. I was just always making things outside of it. I was producing bands. I was doing all kinds of other stuff. So I was already doing things on my own. And at a certain point, like you were talking about with the Macklemore record, like you get a thing and you get an opportunity, you go, okay, this is the time to jump. I don't completely have my wings or the parachute or however you want to do the flying analogy, but now's the time. I feel good enough and I'm getting some work and it's time to just go do that. I think also, I don't know if I think I may have said this on the Key-in one when we were talking about Eric Valentine, but at one point late in my sort of when I was 24, 25, when talking to Eric Valentine, he actually told me I was not a very good assistant. and it was because all we did was I just asked him questions about production. We talked about production ideas and songs and all of this. And he said it with sort of a laugh, because I wasn't so terrible that I was like hampering him, but I wasn't running around doing a great job at prepping everything for him, because he and I just became friends and got excited about. And truthfully, that's like, all right, now it's time for me to go produce my own records.
Exactly.
Because I've learned all of the things from sort of prepping things for his world. Not all the things. He's a genius. He's a certified genius. But learned enough for me to go then do the thing in my voice on my projects. And there isn't really a perfect time to do that. As John said earlier with the Macklemore, it's like you mixed a record completely yourself, a whole album, a song had a hit on it, and you were like, it's time for me to make the jump. And you didn't get work for a number of months, and that's a real thing. By the way, that happened. A version of that happened to me too. I've told it on the streams before. But there's no good answer for that. I mean, part of the reason I don't think of, and this may be the thing we can finish on, I wouldn't think of an assistant job or working under someone or whatever, however we're talking about it. I don't think that is part of a linear path. It shouldn't be part of a linear path, because the people that are going to get hired are the people that are already doing great shit, but now you do a lesser job, a lower on the totem pole job for a higher level person or an artist. Maybe you become a vocal engineer for a huge artist because you're already mixing and doing great things and all that. I mean, we talked about it with Baines and Tizio and some of these other guys where, there isn't a linear path for this stuff. What you're really trying to do is constantly put yourself in the position where you can make the best stuff and do it with great people. And on the way, you may all of a sudden have a lower role in a bigger project, or you may fully executive produce some unknown band, and all of those things may come in different orders, but you really want to be doing all of them in whatever capacity you're working. Oh, somebody just said the Discord link doesn't work. It should be on the Live with MattRad Instagram, but
I'll add to that in closing. For me, that would look, life is a bunch of narratives strung together. And along the way, as an assistant for someone, you get to work on projects and you get to say that you worked on them. You get to talk about it. Talk honestly about your role, whatever you did. Did you plug in cables? Did you prep the mix? Did you engineer the mix? Did you get to do that last round of notes that really took it over the edge? Like, be honest about what you did, but you get to talk about what you did. So you're attached to this stuff in some way, no matter at what level, and that's exciting. It's exciting to hear the reaction. It's exciting to tell your parents or your family that you worked on something that is listened by so many people and it connects with so many people, no matter what you did on it. There's something about it that needs to be recognized for what it is. And I always use that to get myself further and further, because I wasn't lying. I was stoked to be in the room on those things no matter what I did on them. And I'm stoked that Tony gave me these opportunities, and I hope that Josh and Ingmar and Ryan before them are stoked that I gave them any opportunity to touch anything that they wouldn't have without me. And that's what mentorship is about for me too. It's about everybody winning, and it's not linear. And at some point, you'll flee the coop to some degree. We might still work together, we might not, but you're going to gain some knowledge. So I would try to find my true advice from this conversation would be, it's really hard to find a mentor and get in the room with someone like Tony or me or Matt or, Manny or Serban. I see us, flooding in the comments about people wondering about his team. That's what these things are for. That's what Matt and I are doing. That's what Pensato Space is trying to do. Trying to get face to names to sounds and communicate what it's like to be in the room as best as we can. So we'll continue hitting you guys with this information.
And I like what you said too, that I want to get it out of people's head that you're looking for the mentor. I mean, you talk about Tony, I talk about Eric Valentine, but I also I engineered on an album for Jakir King, and I worked with Flood on a 30 Seconds to Mars record, and I worked with Dennis Herring on a Hives record. Like, I was running around being an engineer, and all of those jobs were because I did good work and somebody recommended me. There was no resumes. I wasn't I mean, I was hustling. I was meeting people, but just doing good work and then finding multiple mentors throughout your career. I'm still looking for mentors. I worked with, actually, I'm going to have someone on.
That's another conversation because I feel you.
And I got someone who I'm going to, I don't want to put it out there yet until we confirm it, but I got a guy who's been a recent mentor of mine that I want to bring on here. But I don't know if we got to all the questions. We certainly didn't get to all the questions, but please hit me up in the DMs, come on the Discord, more discussion about this. We could do another hour on this and get into more specifics if people want. But hopefully you guys enjoyed it. John, love you. Good to see you.
Love you too.
And
welcome back.
Thanks, man. We'll do this again soon.
Cheers.
Peace, guys.